I feel like nowadays a lot of the emphasis in the Five Nights at Freddy's series is placed on Shadow Bonnie, or RWQ, FSF, ASXC, rather than Shadow Freddy, despite them being very similar. I mean, look, Shadow Bonnie gets their own cool, convoluted name, while Shadow Freddy is just Shadow Freddy. They both show up as Easter eggs in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, have important roles in Five Nights at Freddy's 3, and are kinda in Five Nights at Freddy's 4. But other than some appearances in FNAF World, Pizzeria Simulator, and kind of in Help Wanted, Shadow Freddy has been seemingly purposely abandoned by the franchise, even with his rabbit counterpart seeming to have taken a stand in this new era. So what happened to Shadow Freddy? And what was he originally supposed to signify in this story? Despite also being a very expensive Five Nights at Freddy's plush, Shadow Freddy first appeared in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, along with RWQ. And yeah, other than that, Five Nights at Freddy's 2 doesn't directly shed any more light on these characters, and for good reason. They're essentially just very rare Easter eggs in this game. In Five Nights at Freddy's 3, Shadow Freddy can be seen as the driving force for the animatronics dismemberment by William Afton, luring them in with the message, "Follow me." Shadow Freddy is also maybe seen as a rare Easter egg in the very left side of the office. At least it's officially called a crumpled Freddy suit according to the Freddy files. In FNAF World, Shadow Freddy simply appears as a character that can join your roster. His loading screen quote also makes it seem like he wants to eat my soul. Like, what did I even do? Every single one of Shadow Freddy's attacks in FNAF World also relate to insta-killing the enemy. In Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, Shadow Freddy, or at least a character with a strong resemblance to him, is seen in the minigame at the very start, opposite to Freddy in an Atari style. And in Help Wanted, Shadow Freddy really isn't seen, but the hard mode version of the parts and service Freddy repair kinda looks like him, with more of a RWQ twist on the classic Freddy model. But I don't think this really counts as a Shadow Freddy appearance though. Just wanted to mention it. And yeah, for the most part, this is Shadow Freddy's relevance to the series, not being seen in either Security Breach or its DLC, Ruin. However, there's also another point I want to bring up. In Five Nights at Freddy's 4, Nightmares mode is referred to in the game files as Shadow Freddy. Specifically, the button enabling the mode is named this. I've seen lots of people saying that this directly proves that Nightmare is Shadow Freddy, but I don't really think that's the case. At least it doesn't prove this connection. However, I can still see why people would correlate these characters together, with both of them being shadowy figures next to their golden counterparts. It's also very interesting that Nightmare doesn't send the player to the game over screen like the rest of the animatronics, but instead the warning screen before the main menu. This could potentially be Scott wanting to bring back the classic crashing game scenario without actually crashing the game and making players frustrated, opposite to what he did with RWQ in Five Nights at Freddy's 2. But if Nightmare is actually Shadow Freddy, then Nightmare's voice lines in Ultimate Custom Night in particular are very interesting. Specifically the ones referring to the Shadow and Nightmare being born from William's wickedness.
The Shadow fears thee. I am your wickedness, made of flesh. I am here to claim what is left of you. I will vomit you back to relieve your horror.
This could tie in with Shadow Freddy being an example of William's wickedness that is manifested into a physical entity of sorts, especially with the ties that William and Shadow Freddy share in the Five Nights at Freddy's 3 minigames. But enough of my rambling. So, with this information, how does Shadow Freddy fit into the different games in the series? Well, to format this in a more organized way, I want to put my ideas out for each game, specifically Five Nights at Freddy's 3 and Five Nights at Freddy's 4, as they were originally intended to be the last games in the series at the time of their releases, and try to see what Scott actually intended for this character. Five Nights at Freddy's 3 gives us minigames that shows Shadow Freddy as the reason why the 4 main animatronics are lured to the safe room. Now, I'm probably not the first person to say this, but I find it very strange that Shadow Freddy is the one leading the animatronics to William. It makes me think that originally, Shadow Freddy was intended to either assist William Afton or actually help the original missing children in setting their souls free. If we think in the perspective of Shadow Freddy assisting William, this could potentially be used with his connection to Nightmare, literally being William's wickedness, his evil side. Some additional details include Follow Me being used in the secret ending of the Fruity Maze minigame in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, and even could be the reason why we see a crumpled Freddy suit next to the main office. William could have used this to lure the animatronics closer to the actual safe room. But realistically, I actually think that Scott wanted the shadows to represent additional spirits that are assisting the MCIs to set their souls free, just as we see RWQ doing in the minigames, specifically giving cake to a crying child. What Shadow Freddy is trying to do is show the animatronics exactly where their killer is hiding, not knowing that William is about to strike. This is also supported in the Freddy Files, but I'm not sure if that book is really 100% canon. To me, it doesn't make a lot of sense for Shadow Freddy to represent William's evil directly, but honestly, I can kind of see how people could come to that conclusion. Five Nights at Freddy's 4 introduces us to minigames after each night that detail the events of the bite victims' last days before the inevitable bite of 83. Besides the theory that Nightmare could be a stand-in for the themes of Shadow Freddy, there isn't any actual appearance of this character in the game. Or is there? Deliberately shown to the audience are literal shadows casted of both Fredbear and Spring Bonnie shown on the stage, which would fit the bill for the shadow versions of Freddy and Bonnie. Now, many people have delved deep and explained the ideas of the now infamous dream theory of sorts. Specifically, Matt Pat's theory titled The Clue That Solves Five Nights at Freddy's. To essentially summarize some of the good points he made quickly, includes different messages that Scott Cawthon had left on his website, the grandfather clock chime after completing every night from FNAF 1 to 3, and different characters that we've met in the series matching up to ones we've seen in the minigames. Had left theorists to believe that the story of Five Nights at Freddy's was simply just a dream. The games were just the inner torment going through the bite victim's mind while recovering in the hospital after the bite. Honestly, I'd go watch the original video if you haven't. It's almost like the beginning of a complete turning point to FNAF's initial story, which was later greatly expanded upon. This would mean that Shadow Freddy is literally just a shadow of Fredbear that resonated with the bite victim to the point that it manifested in his dreams. When Scott said that what is seen in shadows is easily misunderstood in the mind of a child, he meant it very literally. The purple color that is on both the aforementioned shadow animatronics and even the purple guy is used because the bite victim saw these guys in the shadows. The bite victim misunderstood these figures because he saw them in the shadows. A lot of additional details in this theory perfectly match up to what we knew of the series at the time. Some examples given are with the bite victim's brother, scaring him in ways very similar to what we see from Foxy in Five Nights at Freddy's 1, Springtrap just being a stuffed Spring Bonnie plush that's known to pinch, referred to as a finger trap, the toy animatronics literally being toys we see in the minigames, Balloon Boy being a kid that the bite victim saw when returning home, and etc. And for the most part, this is probably right. At least when Five Nights at Freddy's 4 was originally released. But as we know now, the series has absolutely changed its ideas on whether or not the events of the game are a dream or not. In my opinion, I think the series' shift into a more narrative standpoint for its story has changed the original relevance of the shadow animatronics. As RWQ seems to involve Dark Remnant from the segments in FNAF AR, I think the same, maybe even Agony itself, is implied with Shadow Freddy. I've always heard a popular theory going around about the shadow animatronics being past victims of springlock failures, as mentioned by Phone Guy in FNAF 3. I mean, we know that, at the very least, springlock characters included both Freddy and Bonnie. I think it's definitely an interesting take on the shadows. It could possibly tie in with the infused Agony or maybe Dark Remnant as a result of the spring locks mechanics. Another theory I've seen connects Shadow Freddy, or Nightmare in this case, specifically with the bite victim. There's another one I've heard that Shadow Freddy could possibly just be Golden Freddy in the shadows, which could also potentially explain why we never see Golden Freddy actually appear in the FNAF 3 minigames. But at least for right now, I feel that the series doesn't really know what to do with Shadow Freddy going forward, especially with the recent Five Nights at Freddy's 4 revelations possibly severing that tie between Nightmare and Shadow Freddy. Maybe in the future, we'll get to see an arcade cabinet of a Purple Freddy character or a small appearance in Help Wanted 2. But that's just speculation at this point. But honestly, I want to hear what you guys think Shadow Freddy actually represents, or maybe even what he used to represent in games like FNAF 3 or FNAF 4. I especially want to hear if you all agree with theories suggesting that Shadow Freddy is Nightmare, or Shadow Freddy originally intended to help the original MCIs, kind of like how RWQ does, or maybe even if Shadow Freddy is
William Afton.
I don't know. I also want to say that hitting 5,000 subscribers on this channel was a huge milestone, and I can't thank you all enough. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Take care.